Day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
We're back with the big deal. I'm Errol Louis. On his first day back in the White House, Donald Trump has promised to start working on a very long to-do list. One of his main campaign promises was to launch the largest deportation operation in American history. But how exactly would that work, and who exactly would be targeted? We're going to examine that proposal today, just how realistic it might be, and how it could impact millions all across the United States. Spectrum News political reporter Rena Diamante gets us started with a look at the logistics of this promise.
President-elect Donald Trump has ambitious plans for his first day back at the White House.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
Logistically, in my mind, it goes, man, how are you even going to get your hands around that? How do you start?
Victor Manjarrez served for more than 20 years in the U.S. Border Patrol and says deportation is more complicated than it sounds. According to one estimate, there are at least 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the U.S. Manjarrez says they cannot just be picked up and returned to their home countries. Many will have the right to request a legal hearing on their removal, and their home countries have to be willing to accept them.
They still have the right to seek permission to stay in the country. So they can literally ask for a hearing. And at that point, the government's got to either have holding capacity to hold them to their hearing, or they let them back into the country pending their hearings.
The largest deportation operation in history occurred in the 1950s, when more than 1 million undocumented immigrants were sent back to Mexico. No president, including Trump in his first term, has been able to match that scale. Throughout the campaign, Trump and his hardline advisor, Stephen Miller, have offered some insight into how they would carry it out. Miller said there could be so-called staging areas or detention camps near the southern border, including Texas. Experts say Trump's plan would cost hundreds of billions of dollars. But Trump told NBC News he would have no choice but to carry it out, no matter the cost. During the Biden administration, Texas Governor Greg Abbott launched a state border security initiative called Operation Lone Star. It's so far cost more than $10 billion in taxpayer funds. While Abbott recently indicated that Operation Lone Star's funding may eventually be repurposed under Trump, Texas is also in position to help execute and be most affected by Trump's efforts.
There's no question but that the federal government and the state of Texas are going to be cooperating together on a common end to secure our border, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Trump wants to bring back the controversial travel ban that barred people from certain Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. He also wants to revive the policy that required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico as their legal process plays out. Rena Diamante, Spectrum News.
Joining me now to talk more about all of this is Elora Mukerjee, the director of Columbia University's Law School's Immigrants' Rights Clinic. And Professor, as we saw, Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he would use the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 to expedite the removal of undocumented immigrants. Walk us through exactly what that would be and whether it would even apply here.
The 1798 Act is a law that applies only in wartime. That is clear from the language of the statute that was passed by Congress in 1798. It has only been invoked by presidents during times of declared war. There is no legal basis for invoking that act at this time. There is no basis for extending application of that act to the drug cartels that President Trump has talked about. And the U.S. Supreme Court has ratified use of that law only 3 times and only in times of war.
Okay, so that actually leads to my next question. I mean, when asked this week exactly who would be deported, the new so-called border czar for the incoming Trump administration, Tom Homan, said this. I want you to hear this. We'll talk about it.
I've been clear, President Trump's been clear. Public safety threats and national security threats will be the priority because they have to be. They pose the most danger to this country.
So now, out of the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States, nearly 2/3 have been here for at least a decade. Many of them have small children that have grown up here. Some are even American citizens. I know you've represented a lot of these families. it's just not as simple as some of the rhetoric would suggest, right? I mean, how hard would it be to identify and deport only the so-called bad guys?
It would be extraordinarily difficult from a financial perspective, a legal perspective, and a logistical perspective. What Tom Homan describes is prioritizing for removal individuals who are deemed to pose a threat to U.S. national security and those who have criminal records. It's worth noting that those two priorities are no different from what the current administration has prioritized and what recent administrations have prioritized in modern U.S. history.
We saw the last time the U.S. carried out mass deportations was under the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s. Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he's going to model his plan after the Eisenhower plan. That's where federal authorities partnered with local police to round up and deport individuals. That might work in a willing state like Texas, but what would happen in a state like New York or California, where there are sanctuary laws in place locally that limit cooperation between local and federal authorities? Could those states be forced or at least pressured to cooperate?
Absolutely not. Localities and states cannot be forced to carry out federal immigration priorities. That is a basic principle of our U.S. Constitution, which sets up a system of federalism and empowers local jurisdictions and states to carry out public safety in the ways that they deem fit. There's a principle of constitutionalism that's also called anti-commandeering. The federal government cannot commandeer localities, municipalities, states to carry out federal immigration priorities or other priorities.
So now, in his first time in office, the first Trump administration, they banned travel from a number of majority Muslim countries. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court, I think in 2018. The Supreme Court affirmed the policy. Should we expect to see that implemented again? And are there any remaining possible legal challenges to what, on the surface at least, looks like an unconstitutional treatment of people based on their religion?
There will be legal challenges to any efforts to discriminatorily bar individuals from coming to the United States, whether that discrimination is based on race, religion, or national origin.
And I guess finally, the Remain in Mexico policy that Donald Trump did implement the first time, which I think led to about 74,000 people being returned to Mexico under the program. The Biden administration scrapped it, implemented a small version of it. Should we expect to see that policy reinstated? And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't it require cooperation from the Mexican government?
Yes, that program, to reinstate it, would require cooperation from the highest levels of the Mexican government. And it is unclear whether the Mexican government will want to engage in a Remain in Mexico program again. It's also worth noting that the Remain in Mexico program was a humanitarian disaster. Thousands and thousands of migrants and asylum seekers who were sent to Mexico as part of that program were gravely harmed, raped, kidnapped, extorted, and some were even killed. It was a program that should never have been implemented and should not be implemented going forward.
Okay, we've got a lot to learn. Thank you for some of this information. Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.